I'm telling you, take a year off and travel. It's awesome.
You read that thing online that said that City of Fallen Angels was going to be mainly focused on
Simon.
Is that true that it's mainly going to be focused on Simon?
No. The reason that this is an extremely prevalent rumor is that the reason I decided to write City of Fallen Angels was because I was asked by a graphic novel company if I would write a graphic novel based on like a spin-off of City of Glass, and this was before I had decided that City of Glass wasn't the last book, and I said, okay, I'm going to focus it on Simon, because a graphic novel is a much shorter, more like compacted story, so I wanted to tell a little story of what happened to him afterwards. So I wrote this whole storyline about Simon and what happened to him, and then the graphic novel deal fell through. So I had this storyline and nothing to do with it. I still wanted to write it, so I went to Simon & Schuster and said, what would you say if I wrote a fourth book and for the series, because now I have this whole storyline and I want to develop it and work on it. They were like, sure. And you know, they didn't ask for an outline or a summary or anything, because they were basically like, great, okay, more of the same thing. But included in the press release about the book was the information that it had originally been sparked off by the idea that I would write a graphic novel about Simon. So this caused everyone to believe that that meant that the entire book was just about Simon.
City of Simon.
Yes, City of Simon. It's not actually true, because the storyline about Simon wasn't enough for a book. Yeah. It would be enough for, you know, a third of a book. So while the storyline about Simon does still exist and is integrated into the book, all of the other characters are there, and it's really, I mean, Holly's read it. It's split mostly between Clary and Simon's point of view, but you get Magnus and Alec and Jason and Isabel as well. So it's, I think you will not be able to tell any difference really in how it is told between City of Glass and City of Fallen Angels. But that is why everybody thinks that.
I'm an English teacher. Can you talk about the writing process and what it takes to create a book?
I'm gonna let Holly take that one, because I answered a bunch, and then I'll go after that.
Okay. I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting, the more writers that you meet, is how different their processes are. And one of the things that I think you have to do when you're a young writer is actually figure out what your process is, what works for you. There are people who outline in great detail. There are actually a bunch of people I know who take sticky notes and put plot points on their wall and cover their wall in this mosaic of sticky notes, which sounds awesome to me because it really seems like they know everything that's going to happen, which I don't always know. And I have, for myself, I have a totally crazy process, which is that I come up with a bunch of different things, and Cassie can totally verify that this is true. I come up with a whole bunch of things that I want in a book, but no idea how I'm going to get them all in there in one story. Like, you know, in my cat, I wanted this kid who was a con artist. I wanted to have a garbage house. I wanted to retell this weird piece of a fairy tale. I wanted to have all this different stuff, and I was like, and what do you think I should do to do that? And she was like, why do you always do this? And then, you know, what I'll do is often I'll sit down and try and sketch out the first 3 chapters, and I'll rewrite them a lot until I sort of have a sense of them. And then at that point, I'll actually be able to figure out what the book is about, but only then do I really know what it's about. But then I do an even crazier thing, which is that I'll write chapter 1, then I'll write chapter 2, then I'll rewrite chapter 1, then I'll rewrite chapter 2, then I'll write chapter 3, then I'll rewrite chapter 1, then I'll rewrite chapter 2. It's not the greatest process. Don't do that. What does you do?
My process is very collaborative. I generally come up with an idea. I have a general idea of characters, general idea of what I want to have happen, and then I try to get as many of my friends together as possible and make them sit with me and go through it chapter by chapter. What happens in every chapter? How does this, you know, what's going on? How does the story go? And, you know, how does it end? And by the time that I'm actually done writing the book, it will have veered from the original outline a great deal, but that is how I get that first outline down.
and in fact, I tried that for Red Glove, the sequel to White Cat. It actually is it's a great process. It actually is really helpful, but it is 2 of the worst days of your life. It is like you will do anything to get away from these people who keep asking you questions. Like, what happens next? Well, why does he do that? Well, why does he feel that way? Well, what do you think he wants? It's horrible. It's like torture. But then you actually have something that's really, really useful.
And then they ask you all the questions that you wouldn't ask yourself, you know. And then they find your dad on the floor clutching a tiny doll in her hand, and they're like, why? They're like, I don't know. You seem dramatic. Like, well, you need to know.
What inspired you to write the book?
What inspired you to write the book? What inspired you to write the book? Both?
Yeah.
Oh, you. This is one of those things where you tell a story so many times you now no longer remember it actually happening. But I was with a friend of mine, her name Valerie, and she was a tattoo artist, and she took me into a tattoo parlor in Greenwich Village in New York. She wanted to show me where she used to work, and she wanted to show me her book of Flash. Flash is the art that tattoo artists create, so you could look at their Flash book and pick, that one, that's the one I want. She was trying to convince me to get a tattoo. I didn't want a tattoo. She wanted me to have a tattoo. It was a big argument. And I noticed that there were these weird markings all over the walls and on the ceiling. And she said that everybody who had worked there had walked in tattoo ink and then been held upside down by their coworkers so they could walk on the walls and the ceiling. And somehow the combination of looking at her Flash designs, which were all runes, and the footprints on the ceiling made me think of a magical battle taking place in which people were running up and down the walls and the ceilings, and they were using these magical runes to protect themselves. And that is how I got the idea of Shadowhunters, and it sort of developed from there.
Okay, I've got like a couple questions. Okay, in right? Clockwork Angel, is Magnus there?
You mean, is he in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, he's my favorite character.
Well, he's definitely in it. He's in all 3 of the Clockwork books.
To answer my other question, but Holly, in your book, I can't wait to read it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't know what to say now.
We can come back to you if you want.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, your question?
How about in the back? All the way in the back.
This is for Cassandra Clare. What kind of background did you have with the Hebrew? Did you research that, or was that like something that was a part of your family? I was just fascinated by
The Hebrew stuff, Simon?
Yeah.
I am Jewish.
You are, all right.
So, and I always thought that it was from a joke that my boyfriend said once, which is actually in the book. We were watching some stupid vampire movie and somebody's holding up a crucifix and he was like, yeah, but like, what if the vampire's Jewish? What can you do to scare off a Jewish vampire? He's like, what are you going to hold up? Like, gefilte fish or a check for $18?
You played well. She's been hoping someone will get that joke.
The check for $18 thing actually made it into the book, and I do sometimes get asked by people what the heck the check for $18 things means. 18 in Judaism is high. It's the number of life. When you get checks from your grandparents, they're always in some multiple of 18. In fact, last week I got a check from my Aunt Rose for $18, and I was like, thanks. Use that. So yeah, it's my own personal background in Hebrew school, and also when I was researching angels, there's a huge amount of Kabbalistic lore about angels, and Raziel specifically is a Jewish angel who, in the Kabbalah, gave the book of knowledge to Adam and Eve in the garden, and so I thought he was the perfect angel to have given the gray book to the first Shadowhunters.